This story takes place in the Bankhead National Forest, which is a 181,000-acre tract of forest located in northwest Alabama. This forest is known as a land of 1,000 waterfalls, as the area is composed of countless ravines and hollows, with numerous streams flowing in this area. This area also has countless bluff lines, with deep rock shelters located beneath. This was the home of indigenous American people groups such as the Yuchi and Cherokee tribes long ago. It is known for having an abundance of artifacts located throughout the area, and it was this abundance of artifacts that drew Chad to this area. I've been reluctant to make this video for the simple reason that it involves the death of a young man. His name is Chad, and he was 44 years old. And while I did not really know Chad, his father is someone I know and respect a great deal. So this story hits close to home, and I was involved in helping to search for Chad. In fact, I felt compelled to join the search, knowing that if it was one of my children missing, that I would want as much help as possible. One thing to know is Chad was an avid and experienced outdoorsman. He was skilled in hunting, fishing, backpacking, camping, and exploring. He loved to hit the backcountry and search for Indian artifacts. During the process of searching, I learned a great deal about some of the common errors that even the most experienced backcountry explorers make. And I want to share what I've learned in this video in hopes that it might help someone else. See, Chad worked in the construction and remodeling trade, so it was not uncommon for him to have a few days off, especially in January. So on January 25th, Chad grabbed his gear and headed for Indian Hollow Tomb, an area which is located in the northern edge of the Bankhead Forest. This is where he made a crucial mistake, in that he did not tell anyone where he was going and when he would return. He was not really missed by his family for about 3 days, and on the fourth day they started looking and contacted authorities. His truck was not found for 3 more days, and so the search for him did not start until February the 2nd. For the next 3 days, search and rescue teams, local volunteers, canine units, and a helicopter equipped with thermal imaging searched the Indian Tomb Hollow area, and even the surrounding areas. On February the 4th, over 100 volunteers were searching in that area. I entered the search on Sunday, February the 5th, which was the final day for the search and rescue teams. The helicopter was no longer flying that day, so the search and rescue unit asked me if I could fly my drone over a ridge line which was northeast of the Indian Tomb Hollow area. I spent about an hour that morning searching Brushy Mountain with my drone. One thing I came to realize is that looking from the air is very difficult, even when the trees do not have their leaves, and especially when you get in areas where there are evergreen trees. It's almost impossible to see the floor of the forest. After flying my drone over the Brushy Mountain area and exhausting both of my batteries, I went back to the command center and was teamed up with 2 men from the search and rescue unit. We were sent back into the Indian Tomb Hollow area to search it once more. I found the area to be both breathtakingly beautiful and yet very rugged. And that's where we pick up the video now, with us entering into Indian Tomb Hollow.
So we're up on a bluff line right now, and he was looking for Indian artifacts. So we're going to go through this hollow here, and then we're going to work our way all the way down through here on this bluff line.
As we neared the end of Indian Tomb Hollow, we met up with the searchers from the other side of the ravine for a quick update.
We've searched this whole bluff line here, and now we're going to go down the right side and go back, and we've got one more hollow to go up, which is pretty substantial. Actually, 2 of them.
This area lived up to its reputation of being brutally rugged, as one of the searchers on my team slipped on a rocky area, severely twisting his ankle. It was slow going from then on, to say the least. After hiking for more than 2 miles on a severely sprained ankle, we finally made our way to an old roadbed, The search and rescue unit was able to get an ATV back into that area and evacuate the injured man for the last mile. But the day was far spent. It had been a long day of searching and still no sign of Chad. At the end of that day, February the 5th, the search and rescue team pulled out. They left the software with the family so they could continue the search on their own. I picked up with the family a couple of days later on February the 7th.
Headed down Road 81. Yeah, it's just rough. We are in the Bankhead National Forest on a search and rescue. Although by now it's probably a recovery. The young man has been out here for about 12 days now. And we're going to be working our way down this creek. And what was the name of this creek? Flint Creek West? West Flint Creek. And be meeting up with the teams coming from the east and the south. We did get a cell phone ping in this general area, according to the phone company. But it's just a general, about 10 miles, 11 miles from the city of Addison. So this is the kind of thing you encounter when you go off trail. Just start walking beside the creek. Very heavy foliage. I don't mind the cane as much as I do the brambles and briars. But if you're lost out in a place like this, you can see why sometimes people get lost in the wilderness when they go off trail and they're never found. It's very slow going. Checking the creek and all the surrounding area. So here, come across a sinkhole, and David's gonna go down in. Oh crap.
I mean, it looks...
That could be a cave.
Yeah, there's fresh leaves in the bottom, but that could just be from the wind. I don't see any mud smeared on the rocks, but he could have gone in there in a controlled manner too.
It's probably gonna be slick too.
Yeah, it goes. It goes. In fact,
Is it too far down?
you always want to make sure that you can get out
Yes.
before you go in. Because if you commit to this and can't get out, now you've got another rescue, or you've got a rescue. Oh, you can actually crawl out from there.
Oh really? Okay. How far back does it go? Is it a cave or is it just a big room?
Here we go. I'll tell you in a second. Once I cross this loop. Hello? Make sure there's not any cave demons in here. Yeah, that was in there. looks like people know about it because there's a beer can or two, and looks like someone had a fire. It seems pretty stupid that you would light a fire inside a cave.
So right after the man came into this area, we experienced several days of heavy rain. And so this creek was flooded up above the banks, in some places quite a ways. You can see this huge strainer here where a tree came down. And there's a lot of debris fields like that along the creek. If he went in the creek, he could be in one of those, unfortunately. This is the kind of area that we're looking at, especially this bluff line. We're now crossing over to the south side, and we'll be going back. It's about 2 miles back to the car and exploring that side of the ridge over there.
That day, we searched the Flint Creek multi-use area. We had 4 teams, one coming from the north, the south, the east, and David and I coming from the west. We searched approximately 4 square miles, but there again, at the end of the day, there was still no sign of Chad. It was a long, exhausting day.
And we're working our way through a heavily wooded area. This is Saturday, February the 11th. And we're working our way up to a clear-cut area, which several people have sighted buzzards in that area. And we're working our way up there. We did see something on the drone, but we can't get close enough to tell what it is. So we're working our way up to an old roadbed to see what we can find.
The item we saw from the drone turned out to be an old cart buried under a lot of brush. So we made our way up to the top of the ridge and launched the drone so we could get a better view of the surrounding area. As we were flying the drone, searching the areas around the ridgetop, we noticed blue flashing lights off in the distance coming from the staging area. We knew that the deputies and law enforcement were not supposed to be there, so we knew something was up. We decided to bring the drone down and make our way back to the staging area. After making our way back to the staging area, we followed a deputy down the road about a half mile past the Indian Tomb Hollow area to the foot of High House Hill. It was on the summit of High House Hill that a lone hiker had come across Chad, and unfortunately he was deceased. It was a very sad day for the family and all those involved, but at least at this point, we had found his body, and that brought some measure of comfort to the family. However, while finding Chad's body did bring some measure of comfort and closure for the family, there still remains many unanswered questions. What happened? How did it happen? And what could have been done perhaps to mitigate this from happening to begin with? In the next few minutes, I'll share with you what I think happened, and I'll share with you some common sense measures that he could have taken that would perhaps prevented this tragedy from taking place. Stay with me. A few years ago, when Karen and I decided to go backpacking together, I watched many videos covering nearly every aspect of being in the wilderness. And some of these videos I found tremendously interesting, especially those concerning people that went missing and were found years later and sometimes miles away from where they went missing. I found out some people have gone missing even in our national parks and have never been found. Now, there are channels out there, several of them, that like to mention Bigfoot or aliens or portals to different dimensions or even paranormal activity as a reason as some of these people go missing. But the truth is not that sensational, but it's just as equally heartbreaking. The vast majority of people that go missing in the wilderness is because they get lost and they die of exposure. In fact, hypothermia is probably the number one reason most people die in the wilderness after being lost. And this seems to be the case with Chad. I've already talked about one critical mistake he made in not telling anybody where he was going, when he was going, and when he was supposed to be back. But a second critical mistake that Chad may have made was underestimating the weather. We do know that he got started late that day because he was seen at a small country store that afternoon and talked to some people telling them he was going into the Indian Tomb Hollow area. So he got started probably early to mid-afternoon. And I know from the weather reports that it started raining that afternoon and then got cold. It was down in the mid-30s that night and turned very cold the days after. Now we know from the coroner, he said that Chad had probably been deceased at least 10 days. So more than likely, he died within the first few days. In fact, it could have been that very next day. And that explains why the helicopter did not find him with the thermal imaging, is because he was already deceased. Now, something I've learned recently about hypothermia is it's very dangerous. In fact, they're learning more and more about hypothermia and how it affects people. And oftentimes people, it just sneaks up on them. And they don't really realize they've got it until they're in the second stage. And in the second stage of hypothermia, it becomes very difficult to think and reason. And this is why people sometimes just wander aimlessly through the wilderness and are found miles and miles from where they started out. It's because their ability to think and reason is compromised. Now, by the time you get into the third stage, it's almost too late. They've also found something interesting, too, that people have a tendency to burrow into the ground. There's a burrowing instinct, and I guess that's probably the primal instinct to get warm. And so they found that people will go into an animal den or a cave. That explains why some people are never found. They've got hypothermia and they dig down into the ground, they find a hole and they crawl in it. And of course, the last stage, one of the last stages of it is people start doing what is called paradoxical undressing, where they start taking their clothes off because they feel hot. And that seems to be the case with Chad. There is some evidence there around where he was found where he had taken some of his clothing off. So that is a critical mistake that he made. Now, there are other critical mistakes that you can make in the wilderness, and one of them is getting off trail. Now, Chad was a very skilled person in the backcountry, and he did a lot of bushwhacking. And most people, though, should not do bushwhacking. If you're going to do bushwhacking, you need to be very skilled in the backcountry. You need to take not only a GPS device, but a map and a compass and know how to use it. Most people need to stay on the trail. And if you're going to get off the trail, you need to notify someone. You need to let a loved one know, someone know that you're changing your route. I remember watching a story a few years ago about a pastor out west who was doing about a week-long hike through a mountainous area. And he was going to meet up with his family. Well, he didn't show up. And so a huge search was launched. And they didn't find him until he was already deceased. And what had happened to him is he was going through some mountain passes with his dog, and his dog was having trouble. So when he got to the next mountain pass, instead of going through the path, he went off the trail and tried to go down around a lake and come back around the mountain. As he was going near the lake, he was boulder hopping, as oftentimes in mountain lakes, there's a lot of boulders. And when he hopped from one boulder to the other, the next one gave way and rolled on him. And it landed in such a way that it wedged his foot in, and he could not get his foot out. It was stuck between some rocks. About a 500-pound boulder was sitting on top of his leg. Didn't break his leg, but he was trapped. And we know this because he kept a journal. He was not found for a month, or maybe longer, but he was deceased. A hiker walked up on him and saw a man sitting there with a sleeping bag around him, and they found out, of course, that he was deceased. They couldn't find him because he was 5 miles away from where they're looking. One thing I found out from being in the wilderness and looking for Chad is it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. Just a 2 square mile, a 3 square mile area is huge. We do know from the GPS coordinates that some of the searchers got within about 200 feet of where they found Chad. So another thing you need to do in the backcountry is, if at all possible, we need to take every safety precaution possible. Here's something you can buy. This is a Garmin inReach, but there's many other companies that make this. This is a satellite communicator. And this works in conjunction with your cell phone, where you can send text messages to loved ones and let them know if your plan is deviated at all or where you are and what's going on. I bought this after my wife, my son, and I were in Glacier National Park. And we'd gone through a mountain pass and down into a valley about 3,000 feet down. And we were 15 to 20 miles from the nearest civilization, and I use that word loosely. And of course, we're in grizzly bear territory. And I started thinking, what if one of us got hurt? It would take hours for one of us to get out. Hours. And by then it could be too late. The great thing about these devices also is they have an SOS button. You hit this SOS button and it alerts authorities, emergency services, and tells them exactly where you are, and you can tell them what's going on, and they will send help. They will send the cavalry. So it's very important, if you can have one of these, to have one of these devices. Now, in a few years, probably all your cell phones will have that on there, but right now, having a satellite communicator is one of your best bets for protection in the wilderness. Something else you need, and that is one of these. This is a 10,000 milliamp battery backup. Now, you can get those that have more than that, 20,000 or 30,000. But this will charge a cell phone or a satellite communicator at least 2 times. So when we go out for several days, we take 2 or 3 of these with us, because this will do you no good if it doesn't have any power. So this is very important also. So there's some things you can do when you go into the backcountry to mitigate the risk. And that's what it's really about, mitigating the risk. I was a certified forklift trainer for many years with the company I worked for. One of the things I learned when I was being trained is it's not the new forklift drivers that usually get in an accident because they're scared to death of operating a forklift. It's those that have been doing it for years and years and are experts in the field, but they get complacent. And that happens sometimes. A couple of years ago, I got complacent on a climb, and it nearly cost me my life. I was climbing in Colorado with my sons, and we were on a 450-foot climb called White Well. And we were up about 330 feet, and I was going to do the last pitch. So my sons went ahead of me, and they were going to belay me up. When my second son went, I told him, just go ahead and pull the gear, which the last person should always pull the gear. But I was being lazy, and I overestimated my abilities. Now, that route went at an angle, about 120 feet up. And so the gear should not have been pulled at all. So I was trying to get out of this little rock formation, little alcove as it was, and I lost my footing, and I couldn't hold the small crack. And when I fell, I never thought about it, but I swung about 40 feet across a granite facing. Needless to say, I was skinned up pretty bad and shaken up a bit. The thing that was so amazing was my son that was belaying me at the time, he said that rope was over a ledge, and I had just flipped it off that ledge before you started climbing. If it had gone across that ledge and been raked across that ledge, it's very easy, it could have been cut, and I would have fallen 330 or 40 feet to my death. So it's important when we go into the backcountry that we try to mitigate the risk. And we can do that by, first of all, letting people know where we're going, when we're going to be back. Secondly, always checking the weather and be prepared for changing weather conditions, especially when you go into mountainous areas. Hypothermia is a big killer. Third, stay on the route if all possible. If you get off the route, try to communicate with loved ones or someone and let them know that you're deviating from your route. And then purchase one of these. I don't care if you're just going on a day hike. This thing could save your life. Now, if you've got an iPhone 14, I think it has that built in it already. But those are some of the things you can do. Now, there's risk associated with everything we do in life, whether it's going into the backcountry and going backpacking and camping or hiking or climbing, or whether it's we're getting in our car and driving to the grocery store. But we can do things to help mitigate those risks and be safe. And after all, when we go into the backcountry to have a great adventure, that's what we want to do. We want to enjoy ourselves. And so my encouragement to you for making this video is take some precautions. Don't get complacent. Don't ever get complacent. Complacency can cost you dearly. And enjoy yourself when you get out there. I hope this video helps you. I hope it encourages you to be safe. And I hope you got something out of it. God bless you.